Here's your new Pope, Pope Leo the 14th, Cardinal Pietro Parolin. He's been selected as the 267th Pope, announced roughly 18 minutes ago here, although not on mainstream media, assuming the title of Pope Leo XIV. He's described as a seasoned diplomat and a spiritual leader. He embarks on a new journey as the new shepherd of 1.3 billion Catholics worldwide. And so we await for him to appear here momentarily.
The three actual cassocks that were going to get delivered to the Vatican the very next day. The white cassock, the traditional vestments of the Pope. They have the 33 buttons down the front to signal every year that Christ lived. He told me that he's made three sizes for width, but not for height, because he doesn't want to go to all the lengths of making three separate cassocks, because he's going to have to make a specific one for the specific man. But it was incredibly charming to meet him. I mean, what an extraordinary man, doing something so special. And he said to me that he's made a slight tweak to each of them, each of the three sizes, so that when the Pope, who we don't know yet, comes out on that balcony, he will alone, outside of the Vatican, know which of those three sizes this man has chosen, which I rather liked. But we understand that the Mancinelli tailor was a place that Francis found whilst out and about before he became Pope Francis, when then Cardinal Bergoglio was out and about. It's actually sandwiched between an ice cream shop and a pizza restaurant, and he bought his very simple silver cross from there. And so when he became Pope, he decided, well, might as well have my vestments made from there too. So unknown man is now dressing into one of these three cassocks to take on one of the most important offices in the world.
The Mancinellis, the most famous and important fashion house in Italy at this moment. You don't say that very often, right, given all the other names out there in the commercial world. But James, that's extraordinary in detail. So there is something about each of the cassocks that's actually different that only the tailor will know, or did you ask what we should be looking for to know the difference?
He wouldn't tell us. I mean, presumably it's not going to be very, very obvious, because that would be sacrilege, I assume. But yes, some tweak, perhaps to the fold on the shoulder, perhaps somewhere on the neckline, something a tailor may only know. Those of us lay people might not actually realise what it actually is. But he wouldn't give us the little secret. He was very proud of it, though, of course.
Yeah, he should be proud of it, and he's certainly deserving to have his own connection to this moment in history. You know, Lindsay, we were down in the square, and I was talking with a group of sisters from the United States, really from Ohio to Texas, New York to Michigan. They lead their congregations, and they had this trip planned long before the conclave, and they told me that they're hoping that no matter what the decision is, and again, as Father Walk so aptly put earlier, there are a number of different issues and many different ways to tackle them. It can't be just one category or the other. But they did say to me, they said, we hope the cardinals in the Sistine Chapel recognize the human touch of Pope Francis, the way he was able to connect even beyond the Catholic Church.
He was so beloved, of course, people called him the People's Pope. But the saying, David, goes, a fat pope follows a thin one. And the idea here is that often, whenever there's a new opportunity to elect a new pope, that it's a referendum basically on the previous papacy. And I think that that's what many people are so curious, if not anxious, to determine today. Are these cardinals going to select continuity or change? Really, and I mentioned earlier how globally religion is declining, but in particular in the Catholic Church, if you look at Europe, they lost about 1.5 million Catholics just between 2013 and 2022. Africa, on the other hand, is the fastest growing region for Catholics. At least 20% of Catholics reside on that continent. And this is an opportunity really to change the face, a very unique opportunity that only comes along every 12 or so years.
And in addition, Lindsay, to trying to grow the church of Father Martin, we find ourselves, and in addition to trying to grow the church, which Pope Francis tried to do, he also was successful somewhat in reaching out as a global leader, whether he wanted to or not, even beyond the Catholic Church, when it came to certain issues that political leaders, were not as successful in doing.
Well, I think that's right, particularly on issues of the poor, climate change, this famous encyclical Laudato Si, migrants and refugees. I think one of the things to keep in mind, though, as we're talking about the new pope, is he may be a very different kind of pope than he was as a cardinal, right? I was just speaking to a church historian who said John the 23rd was seen as a transitional pope. He called the Second Vatican Council.
It's no bait. He
John
won.
Paul II was supposed to be a certain kind of pope and was a different kind of pope than people expected. There really is a sense that the man who was a cardinal now has a different role, and he has to, as you say, sort of be an actor on the world stage and really be the father that John Walk was talking about. So I think if the man comes out and people think, oh, he's not my candidate, I would say we need to see what kind of pope he is, not simply what kind of cardinal he was.
And not to look at it in political terms or in categorical terms, because, as you say, the moment they become pope, you would think that each one of these cardinals recognizes that the role is much larger and that the faithful around the world are counting on them to be heard.
Oh, sure. And, for example, if he's from a particular archdiocese or diocese, he's focused on that archdiocese or diocese. Now he's focused on the whole world. And he knows that he has to be a father to everyone. And I think this, once again, we say the grace of office is something that they trust. So we also need to give the man at least a couple of months to see what kind of pope he wants to be.
Father John Walk, for our viewers back in the United States watching, we're now more than 50 minutes past the white smoke, the ringing of the bells, where our cameras are trained on that balcony. What do you suppose is playing out inside St. Peter's right now?
I imagine that the cardinals are gathering together and making their way towards the facade. In the past, what has happened, as I recall, has been the windows that are to the side of the loggia where the Pope will appear. Sometimes those windows open first, and cardinals come out also on those balconies before. So you have a sense of sort of growing anticipation, even before the Habemus Papam moment, where we hear the names, as we were saying earlier. There's a sense of activity going on on that floor of the basilica, which is actually parallel. I mean, it's the same level as the Sistine Chapel. They're making their way over from the Sistine Chapel into the upper level of St. Peter's Basilica, and they start filling out in the windows.
There are so many of these crucial moments along the way with this conclave that is now wrapped up. You have extra omnes, which is the final order inside the Sistine Chapel, that everyone who is not an elector, a cardinal who would be voting, that they would leave. We watched those images play out 24 hours ago, people leaving the Sistine Chapel, the doors then closing, echoing across the Vatican, if you will, when those doors close, Swiss guards standing outside, and Father Walk, you bring up Habemus Papam, which the whole world knows means we have a pope.
Exactly. And of course, for him, as I said earlier, he has children, and it's got to be an enormous shock for whoever is the new pope to walk out onto that balcony and look at the crowd and have that feeling they're here for me. People that perhaps didn't know who he was this morning. And all of a sudden he's in this completely new and transformative relationship with so many people, not just in the square, but all over the world.
Father Walk with us here today, Father John Walk, an ABC News contributor. And Father Walk, we appreciate your insight, helping to guide us through what's playing out. Father Martin, you know the cardinals, many of them who were in that room voting. I just have to get inside your mind if I can. Are you wondering if it's going to be someone you know well who is now the new pope?
Oh, sure I am. I think it would be interesting. It's not about me, of course, but I do know a lot of the cardinals, and I think one of the things that I really respect about them is that all of them will tell you this is the most important thing that they do, right? So some of them are bishops, and some of them are archbishops of big archdioceses. That's certainly important, but this is kind of an awesome responsibility. And I asked one the other day, I said, well, how do you feel? Are you nervous? Are you excited? Are you worried? And he just was kind of speechless, and he said it's very hard to describe. So this is something they take very seriously. In a sense, once they're made cardinals, they start thinking about it. Who will I elect? And I also think there's a sense of gratitude and relief. And also, David, this is their boss now, and so they're sort of reconfiguring their relationship to this person who was a peer just a few hours ago.
I'll ask you the same question I asked Father Walk. Do you think the relative shortness to this process signals anything that we got here on the fourth vote like we did with Benedict and Pope Francis?
Well, we'll find out soon enough, but I think Father Walk is right in terms of the fact that since there were so many people from so many far-flung countries who may not have known one another, thanks to Pope Francis's desire to sort of diversify geographically, they may have focused on certain candidates, so maybe 3 or 4 candidates, which would have made for a shorter conclave.
It is an enormous responsibility, isn't it, for all the cardinals inside that room to not only choose someone they believe in, but that they believe is the right person at this moment for the Catholic Church.
Well, that's right, and it's not 2013, it's 2025. And also, David, I think there's a sense of we are choosing someone, we are electing someone, we are recognizing someone that the Holy Spirit seems to be pointing out to us, but we are also giving this man a tremendous burden. Right, so there's a kind of sense of gravity and almost pity on the person, right, that they're giving this burden to, because no one, let's face it, no one has a job like the Pope.
For those of you watching from back in the United States and joining us from all over the world, it is now 7:09 here at the Vatican. Shortly after 1 p.m. in the East, you're watching ABC News live coverage of the conclave, the next Pope about to be presented to the world at any moment. Of course, that's the famous balcony here at St. Peter's Basilica. The new Pope will be brought down the Hall of Blessings there behind that window you're looking at, that doorway. He will be announced first with his first name, his last name, and then his chosen name as Pope. We know that shortly after they reached that 2/3 majority inside the Sistine Chapel, which in this case meant 89 votes, and certainly this Pope likely got even more than that, that they are then asked, do you accept the results of this election to be the Supreme Pontiff? When they say yes, the second question, equally as important, is how do you want to be called? What is your chosen name as Pope? We do know about an hour has gone by. We are expecting to meet the Pope for the first time at any moment. That's why our camera is staying right there. You will not miss it. We know the Pope has already been brought into the Room of Tears, as it's called, and it's called that because it allows the Pope, the new Pope, to have a moment of reflection, to perhaps sort of be quiet in a moment of prayer about the new role they will take on, and perhaps shed a tear, understanding the weight of this moment. As Father Martin put so aptly, it's not 2013, it's 2025, and each one of these conclaves is about naming the leader at this moment who can best take the Catholic Church in the direction it needs to go, to not only reach the faithful, but to grow the Church. That's their goal, and of course, tackle some of the very difficult issues that each one of these popes tries to tackle in their own way. You know, I think back to Pope John Paul II. You know, I grew up as Pope John Paul II was a leader on the world stage. And Father Martin, he was a bit of a surprise when he emerged on that balcony, and we could be surprised here today.
He was, and in fact, when he was announced, many people didn't know how to pronounce his name. They didn't know where he was from. But amazingly, this Pope that was such a surprise was on the world stage for so long and changed the Church in so many different ways. We could be totally surprised. My sense is that it is probably one of the top 10 or 12 candidates that we've been talking about, that everyone's been talking about. But again, who knows who the Holy Spirit has sort of directed these men to vote for.
And Terry Moran, Pope John Paul II, as we know, when we learned of him on that balcony, and of course you and I were a little young, not yet reporters, but perhaps dreaming of being one, that so many people butchered his name, didn't know where he was from, but he was a pope for a long time, because as far as these conclaves go, he was very young.
He was very young. He was 58 when he was elected pope, and he was there for decades, and a global figure. A figure of historic proportions. He grasped this office, this ancient office, with such power, so much of it, however, almost in the spirit rather than in actual temporal power, and he used it.
There he
Terry,
is.
let's take a pause and
There he
watch the
is.
balcony.
There he is. There he is. There he is. Yes. Yes. Ooh, that's. Huh.
annuncio vobis gaudium magnum. Habemus papam. Eminentissimum, ac reverendissimum Dominum, Dominum Robertum Franciscum, Sancte Romane Ecclesiae, Cardinalem Prevost, qui sibi nomen imposuit Leonem XIV.
And again, we had just heard that Robert Francis Prevost of the United States, 69 years old, born in Chicago, has been named the next pope.
It's Robert Francis. Whoa.
Left-hand side of music.
Surprise. Well, folks.
About whether or not there was a slim possibility that there would be an American pope, one from the United States.
We have an American Pope?
He went to
We have an American Pope. I have to stop this one and change, folks.
study mathematics.
We have an American Pope. All right, thanks. See ya.
Ferdinand is the least